Did you notice me standing on the threshold, staring at the screeching red harpy? The downpour had left her hair in long strands plastered to her face. Despite the cold and pouring rain, she resumed her rant. To be honest, I couldn't understand everything because of the heavy rain and the dull roar in my own ears. However, I recognized the point. My wife Zoe was having an affair with Isaac, the husband of the Red Witch. Claire, the enraged redhead Austin, wanted me to put a stop to it. My wife contacted me a few months ago when I was on a rare business trip, and while I watched the cold rain pelt on the grimy hotel room window, she informed me she wanted a divorce after 9 years of marriage because we were separated. I was only gone for a few weeks, and we had only been living together for 5 months since I got out of the army. I had no idea we were having issues. She never said anything. As best as I could tell, she had been emotionally connected with this jerk for 3 months and had most likely consumed him while I was gone on business. It took me a week to pull everything together before the redhead showed up on my doorstep, and I still didn't have any proof, and I attempted to devise a strategy. My wife agreed to go to counseling before I found out about the affair, but she stopped coming after the second session. I suspected she was attempting to persuade the therapist to reconcile me with the breakup. I believe the proposed counseling session was primarily intended to allow her to demonstrate to her family and friends how hard she was working. Her parents in particular, her parents' treatment of her was extremely significant to her, perhaps more than anything else in her universe, so she waited, dating this idiot and living on my salary, until she was certain it would look fine and he was ready to leave his wife and child. Nora and Aria, our 2-year-old twin children, were born to Zoe and me. She gladly left me to watch them as soon as I arrived home so she could go to the gym or run. She did each of these things frequently enough to be in the best form of her life. But after the gym, she and asshole would go somewhere fun. Unhappy isn't quite the proper term to describe how I felt. When I tried to address problems or communicate with her about anything, she would erupt in a frenzy, denying any error and blaming me for everything. She spent a lot of time telling me how difficult it was for her to watch the kids at home while I was at work, and that I was just trying to use the kids against her, neither of which was accurate nor made sense. I spent more time with the kids than she did while working full-time. It was depressing to go through divorce with a lawyer. In our state, adultery is essentially unimportant. It had no discernible effect, and Zoe clearly knew full well that regardless of her behavior, the courts usually invariably award custody and child support to the wife. If there were tiny children, maintenance for several years was also the norm. Instead of hurrying to work, the ex-wife might stay at home and be a good mother. So there she was, a shrieking, ugly, red-haired, tall, and slightly awkward person with a beak-like nose and narrow, angry lips, carrying many more pounds following the birth of a 6-month-old child, which plainly did not sit well on her lanky frame. Her pale skin became blotchy as a result of her rage and the cold rain. I couldn't say anything, so I took a step back, held the door open, and waved at her. I'd already concluded it was pointless for my neighbors to hear a woman yelling at me while I stood outside. While I moved to the dining table and pulled out a chair for her, she followed me, loudly shaming my manhood. After that, I sat down and waited. Gradually, the rage gave way to bitter tears, then to trembling sobs, and finally to sobs. His head sank into his palms on the table, forming a mound of damp, limp, dark copper hair. I waited a little longer for the runny nose to end. "Have you completed your task?" Quiet. She threw up her hands, her face flushed with rage. At me, I sniffed twice but didn't say anything. And I went on to say that if I could do something, I would do it. I dislike it just as much as you do. I went on to explain how the law operated and how I was at a disadvantage. You must kick her cheap, slutty a dollar, without letting go of your rage. I don't blame her. Excellent strategy. Then I might wind up in jail. Then we sat in silence on the street for a while till I got up and produced hot tea. The rain was brutally chilly. I made an effort not to look at her. She wasn't attractive, but she didn't have the breasts to have a very good rack, and that was a deal breaker for me. As the hot tea struck her, she shuddered. I didn't even realize I was so cold. I didn't say anything, but she shifted her gaze to her chest. Crap. Damn. Again, there is not a lot of variety. She encircled herself with her arms. I sighed quietly in myself. It was the most sensual experience I'd had in 4 months. I can get you something to wear. Which one is your wife's? I instantly got out one of my hooded sweaters, which she swiftly slipped on and fastened. She started to squirm. She yanked her arms out of the sleeves and dropped her wet shirt and bra below and slid her arms back into the sleeves. I gathered the laundry and tossed it in the dryer. At the very least, I noted that the show had resumed. The sweater was thinner than the bra and top put together. I grabbed the towel and passed it to her. "Make sure your hair is dry." "Thank you very much." I noticed her breasts bouncing in her sweater as she wiped her hair. It felt unusual to be drawn to anything at that time. I gave myself permission to gaze. Her hair eventually dried out, and she came to a halt. "I despise them," she hissed. "Me too. I had no idea this was going to happen." At that instant, I saw a flash of pain as intense as my own. I simply cannot compete with her. She's in terrific condition and stunning. After having a child, I gained weight. She wasn't very overweight, perhaps 10 pounds. She wasn't in great shape, but neither was I, but she was correct in some ways. Zoe was as lovely as a lady could be. Blonde, blue-eyed, slender, and graceful. Claire still wanted something to grab onto. She's in good shape since she works out at the gym and runs, and you're not overweight at all. A spark of anything other than suffering emerged. So what comes next? I shook my head. I'm not sure. Every time I play this game, I come out alone and broke, and she has complete power over the kids. I told her everything I could piece together. What if you had proof of infidelity? It makes no difference in court. They don't give a damn around here. However, the same factors that harmed me should work to your advantage throughout your divorce. It's really unlikely. Isaac works for a construction company for his cousin. The majority of his pay is secret. As a result, there isn't a lot of official money for alimony for myself and the child. She went on. I just want to squish them. I paused for a moment. What harm can we do to them? She shook her head. I began to feel a little better. In this shithole of a scenario, I finally had an ally. Everyone, in fact, makes mistakes. All we have to do now is discover them. A paycheck under the table from his relative could be a decent starting point. I considered it. Some of the shoes that had recently emerged in Zoe's closet appeared to be incredibly pricey. This money had to originate somewhere. Something is going on there. Zoe is spending unusually large sums of money. She nodded with just a smidgen of genuine excitement. We could do it, I thought. It will be simple. We'll gather the kids and creep about like a terrible version of Magnum PI as well as the Bradys. No, my sister Nora could take care of the kids. She is now responsible for Max. She took a breather and looked serious. So where are your kids? They're dozing off upstairs. She took a peek around the room. Her eyes were drawn to the locked front door. You're wearing sweatpants. I'm drenched. As she removed her shoes, I pulled out my sweatpants. I gestured to the restroom, but she turned away, unzipped her wet jeans, took off her trousers and underwear, and walked out. She then slowly proceeded to dry her legs and buttocks with the towel. The invitation was self-evident, and I could almost hear her trembling. I got the impression she was taking a chance. She was already feeling rejected. She wouldn't have been broken if a guy with a grudge, who had every reason to seek vengeance and who, by the way, had been deprived of sex for so long, had rejected her. I felt a wave of rage, but it was rage directed at my wife for setting me up this way. Claire went on, I can't believe Isaac could do this to me. I took a step forward and rested my hand on her naked thigh. I put my other hand on her thigh because she trembled and her words caught in her throat. I dislike you, but I despise him. She shoved me away. I massaged my thigh with one hand while unzipping my sweatshirt and throwing it to the floor at our feet. Claire admired my hands. Her skin was still chilly and frosty, and she appeared to absorb the warmth of my palms. And as I kissed her neck gently, letting my teeth brush against her flesh, her legs almost gave way. She sighed quietly. I took her up and placed her on the dining table a few minutes later. I wasn't going to squander another second of our meeting because I didn't know when I'd have sex again. I wanted to have fun with it. When everything was silent, she stared at me with an ugly grin. After I had cleaned myself off, I tossed her slacks and pants as well as her top and bra into the dryer. And we sat at the table, nude, for several minutes, drinking already cooled tea. She glanced at me glumly from beneath her tangled mess of red curls. When you invited me in, you knew this would happen. Not until you remove your jeans, that is. She giggled like a child. It was a little frightening. I was worried you would say no. I smiled for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. How can any man say no to that? Isaac has shown no interest in either me or the child since the child's birth. My head shook. I'd heard such things before, but before I could respond, she asked, how could Zoe or any woman turn her back on the sex you just gave me? You're a million times better than Isaac. I'm not sure. She had simply lost interest in me. Isaac is younger, and I believe Mom feels elderly because of the children. This has not occurred since the twins' birth. I guess she thought she needed to be more of a mother figure to me. I can't believe you can't keep your wife under control. I still dislike you. Bastard. Bitch. Our remarks were laced with venom, but we both knew it wasn't aimed at each other. If you truly want to help, ask your sister if she can babysit my kids with yours tomorrow night. And we'd better finish this quickly because they'll be home in about an hour, and I need to clean up this room a little. You should put some air freshener in here since it smells like steamy sex. She yanked on her clothing and dashed out the door. I thoroughly cleaned the room and washed the towels alongside the garments in the washing machine. I found it surprisingly easy to dodge the late-night chats when Zoe went home. We always had problems when she denied something and lied about everything. She appeared perplexed by my lack of enthusiasm. It's surprising how excellent sex can take the sting out of bitterness. She also seemed to remark on the immaculate cleanliness of the kitchen. I suppose she said something about how the air freshener worked, but I didn't care. She was equally mortified when I forgot to kiss her goodbye nearly ritualistically as I left for work the next morning. I didn't even try, and I could tell it caught her off guard because I just walked out. I was going to stop sitting around being miserable and get it over with, whatever it was. I established an arrangement at work to borrow a friend's automobile for a few months. Claire's sister, who looked uncannily similar to her, stayed behind to keep an eye on the kids at her residence. Claire and I went with her. We were going to check out his cousin's construction firm trailer. If there was something illegal there, the investigation could begin there. She winced slightly when she got into the automobile. Everything is painful. This is the first time I've had sex in a very long time. And you weren't exactly gentle. Don't expect to get anything today. I cocked my brow. Tenderness does not appear to be on your mind. Despite her best attempts, she managed to repress a small smile. I saw she was wearing cosmetics for the first time since we met, albeit inadequately. I changed my mind and went to the retail mall. We attempted to find something to chat about, but we didn't have much in common, so the discussion went in spurts and started until we turned into a shopping center parking lot. She appeared perplexed. Are they present? No, but I believe we intend to harm them, so a few little steps must be taken. What are you on about? I took her to the Macy's makeup counter. She fixed her gaze on me menacingly. Consider it camouflage. The two women fussed over her for an hour, trying a million makeup combinations, resulting in a fairly presentable Claire, whom they showed how to apply their products. She wasn't particularly attractive, but she managed to express a kind of burning, hungry sexuality. This will suffice. I spent $100 on groceries for the set, but I'll just miss lunch at work for the next month and be fine. We returned to the car, and she was carrying the small beauty bag, as if it were the holy grail. She didn't want to enjoy it, but she did. So what does it all mean? You'll need something if we're going to hurt them. Isaac desires something he appears to have forgotten. And I need something that will anger and enrage Zoe. You will be the one. When you get home, you hide your cosmetics and only wear them when you and I go out. She appeared perplexed, and I told her about my entire strategy. She sat for a full minute without speaking. Oh no, it's complicated and will take a long time. I shook my head. Do you have a better strategy? She gave a small smile. No. She invited me to her place to remove my makeup so Isaac wouldn't notice. She went into the restroom and emerged a few minutes later, holding a towel. She was dressed in nothing but an evil grin and makeup that she had to wipe off. Her malicious glimmer told me everything I needed to know about her motives. I examined her. I thought you said I shouldn't expect anything. It would be a shame to squander these cosmetics, so she threw in the towel without fanfare. We finished up and went to her sister's place. Claire enlisted the help of her sister as an accomplice. She obviously never loved Isaac, and we desperately need her assistance. We basically worked on ourselves for the next few months. I worked out at work during lunch, she worked out at home, and we both worked out in the basement. Until Claire shed her baby fat and strengthened her entire body. I also gained a lot of strength. We masked it from our self-centered husbands by dressing sloppy and acting evasively. In any case, they didn't seem to notice us. We also had sex at least 5 or 6 times per week, which was more than I had with Zoe. We were both stay-at-home moms, so we decided to change that. By chance, I turned my basement into a dance studio. We didn't know anything about it. However, the power of you two triumphed. Because our husbands kept neglecting us, we had a lot of free weekends and evenings. We began with simple dance steps and progressed to more sophisticated ones. We had a lot of fun dancing salsa, but we had to leave it until the end of our routine. One thing I rapidly learned was that I was playing with fire. Claire had the character of a wild Doberman puncher and was not very stable. Her moods shifted unexpectedly, and virtually anything can set off a surge of unjustified rage. Everything that happened with Zoe and Isaac shattered something vital. We trampled on one of those sanity barriers. I tried to keep my gaze fixed on her at all times. The only time she seemed stable was when she was having sex or when she was among children, mine or hers. Her devotion to children was undeniable. She still called me a bastard, and I still called her a bitch, but the words were weirdly warm, if not loving and sweet. But it was all for the sake of making us feel better. There was legitimate work to be done, and we had to be quite cautious. Claire made up an excuse to go to the construction company's trailer during the day, and she managed to record the entire thing on her cell phone. The cousin turned out to be too frugal to purchase an alarm. We sneaked in 5 times, photographed every document in every filing cabinet drawer, and started going through the documents piece by piece. Zoe's wallet. We stopped arguing with our spouses after a while, which was a problem for Zoe. She really appeared to miss the disagreements and tried to start disputes for no reason, but I never fell for it. Hardly ever, to be honest. After spending the entire day with Claire, I found myself too drained to engage in any disputes. It took me a while to realize that Zoe might have been using conflicts as a way to rationalize her terrible actions to herself. Each day, her confusion seemed to grow, while Isaac appeared convinced that Claire had completely given up. On a brighter note, I had a stroke of luck with my finances. I finally received my $2,000 deposit, which I intended to invest in a holiday villa at a Mexican beach resort for Zoe and me on our anniversary, even though it was clear that this event wouldn't materialize. I hadn't expected a refund, but to my surprise, the resort's customer relations department came through. The extra money would definitely come in handy. As Zoe started making excuses to stay over at Isaac's place, Claire and I decided to hit the dance clubs, slowly putting into practice the dance moves we had learned. It was a lot of fun, but also quite nerve-wracking. Claire's unpredictability was a constant burden, as she could switch from joyful excitement to almost psychotic rage without warning when provoked. One particular night nearly turned into a disaster, serving as a stark reminder of the need for caution. By this time, after several weeks of exercise and nearly daily intimacy, Claire practically exuded sensuality. So it wasn't surprising that people often tried to approach us while we were dancing. She enjoyed the attention, but at the same time, she didn't want to encourage the advances of guys who were with their friends. Unfortunately, some guys assumed she would dance with them just as enthusiastically as she did with me. At a small club in the middle of nowhere, I was dancing with a petite blonde cheerleader while a guy attempted to inappropriately touch Claire. She warned him twice, but he persisted. I intervened just in time, grabbing her by the hair as she lunged at him. "Stop," I exclaimed. Her claws narrowly missed his eye, leaving bloody marks on his cheek. With the blonde on one side and an enraged Claire on the other, I feared a disaster was imminent. However, the guy quickly retreated, his eyes wide with shock. Claire slowly turned away from him, wrapping her long leg around my hips and pressing herself tightly against me. "You jerk, you pulled my hair. It hurts," she complained, then purred seductively. "But you really know what I like, don't you?" She glanced at the bewildered blonde next to me and added, "You can do so much better than this guy. You deserve someone better. He's just an idiot." We briskly made our way out onto the street, keeping an eye on 3 guys in safety t-shirts heading in our direction, just to be safe. The parking lot brimmed with cars, yet it seemed devoid of people. As I advanced through 2 rows, my attention was drawn to a guy with visible scratches and 2 companions who disembarked from a vehicle. He made a beeline for Claire, while his friends approached me. Claire couldn't help but smile, saying, "I don't understand." I introduced myself to you. Your boyfriend can witness you losing something from your pants for this behavior. Claire's bravado wavered briefly, and the guy reached out to her, seemingly intent on grabbing her. However, I sensed an ominous glint in her eyes and felt the largest of the 3 advancing behind me. Claire didn't lunge with her hands. Instead, she unleashed her teeth. The guy emitted a piercing scream of horror and pain. I swiftly turned around. I wasn't an MMA champion, but I was no stranger to combat. Recognizing the ferocity in Claire's eyes, I was prepared. Just as she was about to strike him in the chest, I pulled her back, urgently saying, "Claire, stop." She cast me a defiant glance, then abruptly halted and flashed a smile. As I distanced myself from her, I spotted a couple of figures standing about 15 feet away in the parking lot. 2 individuals stood there in astonishment, a petite blonde girl and a dark-haired goth girl. Claire also noticed the distressed blonde. My instinct was to grab Claire and make a quick exit, but I knew it would only enrage her further. If I didn't extricate us from this situation promptly, we could both end up in jail by morning. Claire approached the visibly stunned blonde and loomed over her. "Claire, behave yourself." "She didn't do anything wrong," I implored. Claire glanced at me and smiled before pulling the blonde towards her and engaging in a passionate kiss. My initial impulse was to intervene, but I realized that the blonde was kissing her back with fervor. Claire slowly released her, leaving the blonde in a trance-like state. "You can definitely find someone better than him," Claire assured her as we made our way to the car. An ambulance sped past us, heading towards a location about 2 miles away. I didn't have to speculate on its destination, and I could only hope that no one had taken down our license plate number. I'd pulled into a secluded spot in the parking lot to offer Claire my shirt, though she seemed more interested in something else. I reclined the seat, and we shared an intimate moment until Claire was satisfied. It took a while, and then she reflected, "I really messed up, didn't I?" I responded, "We all have our moments, but it did seem oddly satisfying to see him hurt." Claire concurred, "Yeah, I noticed. It's a bit unsettling, almost like a Hannibal Lecter kind of way. Harming him felt like a release of pent-up anger, almost like having sex. He certainly had it coming, though I wasn't entirely sure the law would agree." Nevertheless, Claire seemed oddly amused. "Seriously? About hurting?" she asked. "Promise me you won't let me do this again." "Promise me," very seriously. Her eyes welled up with tears as she continued, "You defended yourself." I reassured her, "I know, but that's not the point. I wanted to hurt him so badly. It was overwhelming. And if it happens again, what if I can't stop? What if I lose myself?" Claire's tone shifted suddenly, sounding like a scared little girl afraid of the dark. It genuinely alarmed me. Claire might need some professional help, maybe medication or therapy. In the aftermath, we took care of the paperwork. The brutal attack in the parking lot was attributed to a gang of 6 men and a Hispanic woman, witnessed by a blonde whose real name turned out to be John. I couldn't help but chuckle as I showed Claire the papers. "So it looks like you made quite an impression on John after all," I remarked. Claire smiled, saying she seemed nice, wearing strawberry lip gloss. "Do you like girls?" I responded, "I didn't really think about it that way. I was just playing around with her at the club. The parking lot incident was a whole different story. She wanted me, I could see it in her eyes. And ever since you and I got together, I feel like I have no sexual boundaries." In the wake of this incident, Claire seemed to be making an effort to take care of herself and gradually improved, though it was a slow and uneven process. I witnessed her struggle against her inner demons and occasionally win. Claire's sister couldn't babysit the kids every night, so she often brought Max along, and we practiced putting the children to bed. As we stood in the doorway, watching over the kids, I occasionally stole glances at Claire. I was surprised by the softness in her expression, and sometimes she caught my gaze and smiled sadly and gently. In those moments, her demons felt miles away. I knew that sooner or later, something would happen. Then came the day when Zoe found me shirtless, noticing that I had lost weight and gained new muscle. She commented on it, but I chose not to engage in an argument. I put on my shirt and left the room, mostly to prevent her from seeing Claire's fingernail marks on my back and buttocks from the previous night. Zoe's growing suspicion meant we had to move on to the next phase of our plan. I confided this to Claire, and a few days later, instead of exercising and making love, we had a car and a borrowed digital camera. When Zoe and Isaac left the house, we discreetly followed them at a distance. Claire meticulously scrutinized receipts and credit card bills until we deciphered their spending patterns. Zoe was cautious, but in Isaac's perception, Claire appeared overwhelmed and defenseless. So Isaac had been careless and foolish. His parents owned a modest beachfront cabin nestled in the woods. Although it was a bit weathered, judging by the car's mileage, it seemed like their go-to spot on Fridays when they decided to skip the gym. We veered off the road and silently made our way towards the cabin, armed with our camera. Since there were no curtains, locating them wasn't too challenging. By the time we positioned ourselves, they were already sprawled out naked on the bed. Knowing that we'd have to return to the car, I discreetly deflated one of Isaac's tires to slow them down in case they attempted to leave prematurely. Afterward, we dropped off the film in a darkroom known for handling discreet, ephemeral photographs and then headed back home. Zoe returned home much later than her usual time, her clothes and hair in disarray. Claire, giggling, informed me the next day that Isaac had suffered a flat tire and ended up picking up a nail on his way back, resulting in a miserable, rainy trek to a gas station 4 miles away. Call it karma. Over the following week, we had discussions about our next steps. Claire surprised me, but eventually I concurred with her plan. We kept our intentions under wraps and executed our grand scheme approximately 3 weeks after amassing our evidence. On Saturdays, Zoe and Isaac consistently vanished for the entire day, starting with a trip to the gym, followed by a visit to their secret rendezvous and a nightclub for dancing and revelry. They typically returned home around 6 or 7 a.m. on Sunday. This time, however, things took a different turn. Once they departed, we entrusted the kids to Claire's sister and embarked on our own mission. First, we went shopping. Claire selected a form-fitting dark emerald dress with a plunging neckline and a daringly short hemline. The emerald green beautifully complemented her hair. I donned a dark gray suit paired with a black shirt. We then headed to the hair salon for some pampering and makeup. After getting all dolled up, we proceeded to the club, striding in as if we owned the place. Technically, the bouncer was supposed to check our IDs, but Claire exuded a captivating allure. Considering that part of a bouncer's job is to ensure the crowd is intriguing, they let us through without even requesting our identification. We were the first to hit the dance floor, setting the mood for the night. Eventually, we transitioned to the main event. Zoe and Isaac always occupied the club's reserved table in the corner every Saturday. Claire clutched my hand firmly as we approached their table. Zoe was dressed in a striking yellow gown that I had never seen before, while Isaac was sporting a blue suit. I won't deny that Claire outshone Zoe in terms of allure. Zoe possessed a sun-kissed elegance, but Claire exuded pure glamour. Rather than exuding elegance or sophistication, she proudly flaunted a provocative bad girl look that oozed sensuality and decadence, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. I courteously pulled out a chair for Claire and took a seat myself. Zoe and Isaac appeared utterly stunned, frozen in place. I glanced around with feigned surprise and commented, "Very impressive place. Most gyms are far less fancy." Isaac's face darkened, and he shot an accusing glare at Claire. "This dress, you spent money on it, didn't you?" He snapped with sharpness in his voice. I retorted, "No, I bought it." I then slammed a stack of photographs onto the table. They were the least flattering ones I could find. Most of the pictures I had taken were far more flattering, as they were, after all, attractive people. I sifted through the stack and retrieved the most unflattering ones, portraying them as sad, clumsy, and disheveled. I also received a partial refund for a bungalow reservation at a Mexican beach resort, which I had planned to surprise Zoe with on our anniversary. Since that plan has gone down the drain, I decided to put the money to good use, I explained. Something flickered across Zoe's face. Perhaps disappointment, probably because she realized there was more money involved than she had initially thought. Isaac finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, his expression dumbfounded. Zoe turned paler. I pressed further, asking, "So how long has this been going on?" "We've been onto you for nearly 4 months. How did we find out everything?" The question hung in the air, and I continued, "To be honest, we didn't really need to find out. You didn't even make an effort to hide it. You simply assumed we'd be too defeated or too weak to take any action." Isaac attempted to regain some composure and smirked mockingly. "So what? You two fell in love." Claire grinned wryly, retorting, "I can't stand him, not one bit. He's an utter jerk." She glanced at Isaac with a predatory smile, then added, "And she's a real piece of work. I can't stand her either. But the sex, oh my God, it's incredible. Nothing beats furious revenge sex. All those wicked things you can imagine." She trailed off, casting a meaningful look at Zoe. "A hell of a lot of things you'd never do, I'm sure." But good old family betrayal convinced the girl to try out all sorts of new experiences. She emphasized the last phrase, involuntarily glancing at Isaac. Zoe recoiled as if she'd been slapped and turned her gaze to me. She implored, "You can't do this." We tried to work things out together. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. "That was pure nonsense," I responded sharply. "You were just biding your time until this jerk was ready, while I had sex with him 3 or 4 times a week, babysitting our daughters, and living like a damn monk. For months, people would come to my office to deliver the dreadful news. Not only did you cheat, but you turned it into a damn public spectacle. We didn't even need surveillance to catch you. It was all out in the open." My anger was mounting rapidly, but Claire squeezed my leg, silently urging me to let her handle it. She took over, speaking calmly but firmly, clearly, "Divorces are in order for adultery. It may not make a difference financially, but let's face it, it's more equitable, and it will make us feel better. My new hobby will be ensuring that everyone gets copies of these photos and a full explanation of how you both wrecked your marriages, your families, your coworkers, and your employers. You know, I'll even track down your first-grade Sunday school teacher," I remarked, momentarily focusing on Isaac. "By the way, I'm moving in with my sister for the time being, along with Max," I continued, adjusting my stance. I tossed the ball casually before adopting a more serious tone. "But here's something even more significant for you two to consider. The fact that the two of you have been embezzling money from a construction company's building materials account. It took us a while to piece it together, but once Claire noticed how you both were spending like sailors on vacation, we knew that money had to come from somewhere. Claire and I have collected more than enough evidence. There were potential tax issues, wire fraud, and even a case of mail fraud. I continued, making sure to emphasize the gravity of the situation. So even if Isaac's cousin is willing to overlook it, you're facing a real problem. You're probably looking at 5 to 10 years in prison, I pointed at Isaac, and a couple of years as an accomplice for you, Zoe. Zoe's eyes widened as she immediately began to defend herself. I didn't know. I thought it was his money, so I put it in the account to protect it from divorce. I cut her off firmly. Yes, you were keeping it for a friend. Besides, this makes that money a part of our divorce settlement. If my name had been on that account, I would have assumed you were setting me up. It would have ended very badly. Zoe and Isaac turned visibly pale, suggesting that they had at least considered that possibility but ultimately decided against it. I proceeded to present a counter-proposal that Claire and I had already discussed. Isaac, you have one chance for a better future, I said sternly. Take it. Quit your job and head to the mountains at least 400 kilometers away. Take your car, clothes, football trophies, and yearbook. Nothing more. Not a damn thing. I then shifted my attention to Claire and clarified our divorce terms. Claire files for divorce. She won't get anything out of it anyway, considering your secret deal with your cousin. We won't cooperate with the cops or your cousin. If your cousin finds out and takes action, it's your problem. I'd suggest returning any money you still have to his company account. It might deter him from looking for you. Addressing Zoe, I declared I'll file for divorce with primary custody, no alimony, and no service, citing adultery as the reason. You either agree to it or face jail time, with me obtaining full custody. Claire interjected humorously. He offered me your things, but the shoes are too small and the clothes stink. I've stopped wearing granny pants around him, so you can keep those. I smiled at Claire, and she continued, find a job, move in with your parents or anyone else, I don't care. You'll have plenty of visitation rights with the kids. I won't block that. I won't even reveal the reason for our divorce to your parents. I leaned in, making sure they were fully focused on me, and concluded, time's running out, tomorrow at midnight. If Isaac's not on the road by then, we'll hand everything over to his cousin and the authorities. This offer only stands if you both agree. Claire leaned forward, subtly showcasing her cleavage, possibly for Zoe's benefit. You two have accomplished quite a feat, she said with a smirk. The two of us. We were serious when we said we had nothing in common. We couldn't even agree on a movie. We loathed each other's music. And if he talked about his hobbies, I'd have fallen into a coma. And she's a petty, emotional harpy, I chimed in, frustration evident in my voice. Her voice grates on my nerves like broken glass, I added. Claire continued, her gaze locked onto Isaac's eyes like a snake sizing up its prey. So when we got together and couldn't figure out how to punish you, we resorted to one thing, sex. That's all that seemed possible. If we ever had dinner together, it was just to gather our strength for another round of intimacy, she said, looking at Zoe. I can't believe you left him for an ignoramus, Claire continued, her tone unwavering. I'm not bluffing. If you doubt it, come with us sometime, and you can witness it firsthand. It might even be hotter, if that's possible. I glanced at my watch and interjected, remember our agreement. Sorry, but we need to go now to pick up the kids. I rose from my seat and extended my hand to Claire. Something had shifted in Claire's demeanor, perhaps as a result of her confrontation with Isaac and Zoe. The wild, uncontrollable anger appeared to have dissipated, simply vanished. Her sexual desire remained unabated, but that manic edge of genuine madness had disappeared. Zoe almost beat me to it. I had just put the kids to bed when she burst through the front door, urgently declaring, we need to talk. I settled into an easy chair, stating, we should have had this conversation months ago. Zoe implored, listen, can we move past this a bit? You can't just let this creep destroy us. I held up my hand to stop her, countering, the only serpent who destroyed our marriage is standing right in front of me. She regarded me with an unusually disgusted expression, a rarity for her. You really don't understand, Zoe, I continued. Compared to Isaac, your fate is almost delightful. Claire bargained for you, pleaded and begged for you. She attempted to paint Isaac as the true villain in this mess, and you can't even fathom how difficult it was for her. She despised you with every fiber of her being, yet she did it for you. She feels like her train wreck wrecked ours. I'm not sure I entirely agree with it, but I made a promise because she begged me to. I paused, restraining my anger before it erupted. Then, in a measured tone, I continued, if the money laundering account had been opened in my name, or if the twins' DNA had turned out differently, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. She blinked, suddenly realizing with horror how isolated we were. "How long do I have to move out?" she inquired. I replied, "I'm giving you until midnight tomorrow, just for the elegant symmetry of it all. But I'll extend it to a week. It'll take you 2 days just to pack all those shoes, and God knows I want them gone." She mumbled something akin to an apology and ascended the stairs. It took her 5 days to complete her move, leaving me alone with the kids. Even with the twins, everything seemed strangely empty. I heard that Isaac's cousin was searching for him but refrained from involving the police. I may have bent the truth a bit regarding not informing his cousin. 2 weeks later, I allowed the twins to spend a weekend with Zoe and her parents. They clearly understood the rules, and Zoe grasped that any misbehavior would result in a swift trip to prison. Close to midnight, a knock echoed at the door. I opened it to find Claire standing there, adorned in her club attire and makeup, appearing almost jubilant. It was reassuring to see someone adapting to the circumstances. "So she's gone," I remarked, and Claire nodded. She had returned to her parents, attempting to explain the enigmatic copy of the divorce petition adorned with Chester written in bold red lipstick. "Thank you for sending it." She grinned with her trademark crazed smile. "Great. I wanted to do something nice for her. Let's give them something to talk about." I chuckled, even though I had promised not to inform Zoe's parents. Claire, on the other hand, had made no such pledge. Consequently, a series of packages containing photos were dispatched to Zoe's friends and family. I doubted she'd ever truly recover from the scandal, and Claire's grin only widened in response to my comment. "Hey, I brought a housewarming gift," she announced, and although I didn't technically move, she wasn't entirely wrong. The house felt different, almost new. "I think we can share dessert," she suggested. From behind her, a familiar face wearing a light cap peered out. I'd bought cream puffs. Poor John, I thought. With limited experience, she was akin to candy that Claire and I shared between us. We pulled her into our whirlwind, where she functioned more as a catalyst than a partner on an open fire. Not that she complained. After all Claire and I had been through over the past months, we were more than capable of giving John a crash course in pleasure. She even passed out twice, a fact that Claire seemed to relish with a triumphant grin. The following morning, Claire helped John, whose legs were still shaky, to her car. A few nights later, Claire visited me alone, and a few days after that, she arrived with Max. Once the children had fallen asleep, she wordlessly led me straight to the bedroom. This time we moved slowly, much more deliberately. Afterward, I lay there gazing at the ceiling, with her head resting on my shoulder as her finger traced patterns on my chest. I decided to address the elephant in the room. "We can't continue like this, Claire." I began sensing her tension. We may have never explicitly said it, but I think we both understand that we have nothing in common. No real feelings, and I have an issue with that. Silence followed, and then in a hushed tone, Claire muttered, "Bastard," before tracing a heart on my chest with her fingernail. "You were probably a dumb kid. Should they have brought in a specialist to teach you how to walk?" I retaliated, "Bitch." Zoe may not have suffered enough in Claire's eyes, but it had been Claire's choice. Claire was a complex and possibly unhinged individual, making it difficult to comprehend her motivations. Perhaps she believed some were beyond redemption, or maybe she wanted Zoe to witness the extent of her loss. One thing was certain, Zoe had lost everything she truly valued, a result Claire had meticulously ensured. I had no doubt Claire wouldn't be as satisfied if Zoe were behind bars. It wouldn't provide the same satisfaction. Claire was determined to maintain control over Zoe's access to her own daughters over time. From that first day she stood in the rain, this may have been Claire's plan all along. To be honest, I wasn't entirely sure, nor did I want to inquire. Claire had a simple response. Claire was who she was. Claire held a permanent place in my heart. While she might not possess Zoe's conventional beauty, that was irrelevant. Claire loved fiercely and unconditionally, refusing to let go until she crumbled into dust. She had resurrected John on numerous occasions, but John posed no threat to our relationship. She was the treat Claire wanted to share with the man she loved. As Claire put it, John was essentially all about the treat, a delightful extra piece of cheesecake that you couldn't consume on your own, but were more than happy to share. Claire was simply expressing her love in an unconventional manner. Sure, she was manipulative, crazy, and perhaps even dangerous, but that was Claire in all her complexity.